Ross Douglas is going to be named the new wide receivers coach of this Oregon program following the departure of Junior Adams to the Dallas Cowboys. You know, when I saw this report kind of come through on late Saturday night, I thought, man, when Dan Lanning swings, he doesn't miss. Listen to this, is what Fran Brown, the head coach at Syracuse, Ross Douglas was just the wide receivers coach and passing game coordinator at Syracuse this past year. This is what Fran Brown had to say before this past season. Quote, Ross is one of the young, bright minds in college football. He'll be a great head coach one day. Those are kind of very similar words when a lot of people talk about Rashad Samples. And both of these guys are on this staff. This means, of course, that Rashad Samples is going to remain the running backs coach for this Oregon Ducks program. Now, what has Ross Douglas really done? He was with the New England Patriots before he came to Syracuse this past season. But, you know, he is young, very young in his coaching career. But, man, what he was able to do with this Syracuse offense last season, yeah, that certainly says a lot. The number one passing offense in the country, the Orange were, and Douglas served, as I said before, as the wide receivers coach and the passing game coordinator. 3 wide receivers had over 930 yards and 7 touchdowns last season. That's Arondé Gadsden, Trevor Pena, and Jackson Meeks. Jackson Meeks, there in upstate New York. Now, I mentioned you have 2 really good young coaches on this football team in Rashad Samples, in Ross Douglas. Junior Adams held the title of co-offensive coordinator. And, of course, that gets you to kind of be a bigger part of the game planning process with, of course, Will Stein as the main offensive coordinator. Where is Dan Lanning going to go as to kind of who holds the bigger responsibility? It makes sense on most coaching staffs to have the wide receivers coach hold that co-offensive coordinator title. Although with this hire being made at the wide receivers coach, there's a possibility that Rashad Samples could have that co-OC title. That's something to just keep in mind. I don't know how big of a deal in the end it really is. I don't think because of this move for Ross Douglas being the wide receivers coach, I don't think we're in danger. I know Texas has been thrown out there, and maybe they could poach Rashad Samples as their running backs coach, left the program in there as well. I feel very confident, and I feel very excited that you've got these 2 young studs in the coaching profession right now with Rashad Samples and Ross Douglas on your coaching staff right now. Like, these problems of like who's going to be the co-offensive coordinator, who's going to have a more involved voice in the game planning process. Look, there's no crying on the yacht. This is a we're standing on the yacht type of problem right now at Oregon. This is as good of a problem as you can have when you have this type of young coaching talent in your room and you got to decide who's going to have a bigger role. Both of these guys are going to have a role, certainly, on the development of this offense and just how good this offense can be next season. When I look at the profile of Ross Douglas right now, I think there's no doubt what he was able to do this past season at Syracuse. Look, I understand it's only one season, but if Dan goes out and he makes this hire, and I think this is a pretty convincing hire for Dan Lanning right now, I think that installs a lot of confidence. And I think I've got a lot of confidence in what Ross Douglas can do from an on-field coaching, developmental standpoint. We haven't really seen it, or he doesn't really have a significant track record just because, you know, he's a very young football coach of what he can do from a recruiting standpoint. Like before the 1 year at Syracuse, he was in the NFL with the New England Patriots. So I'm very curious to see what prowess he is going to have in that regard. But here's the thing on this Oregon staff when it comes to a recruiting standpoint, and you're losing a great recruiter in Junior Adams. But maybe this is an opportunity for Rashad Samples to have an elevated recruiting role that went beyond what he had on this staff previously when Junior Adams had an increased recruiting role alongside Rashad Samples certainly as well. You combine the recruiting prowess of Rashad Samples with that of the development on the field coaching and the potential of someone like Ross Douglas, that could be a combination for a great passing attack going forward for the Oregon Ducks. I really like this hire and what Dan Lanning was able to do here.